Well, we got painted parts. Yesterday, working on that axle, or tearing that other side apart, getting the hub off and everything, ran into two snags. The first one was an easy fix. Actually, it's laying out here. This hubcap that is now full of water. Notice how these guys are flat. This guy is not. Apparently, at some point, the bearings went out in that side, and the wheel must have slid in, and the end of the spindle started rubbing a hole in the cap. So, had to shit can that, and luckily I had last winter, actually, that HFS store that I got the dealers from, or not the dealers, the HFS dealer that I got the brochures from, they sold out, and they were getting rid of all their Oliver and White and Moline. They were all their old inventory. They were getting rid of it because the IH dealer that bought them out obviously didn't want it. And they had a brand new cap still in the bag with the WFE tag on it in red primer. So I had a cap already. I blasted it and reprimed it and painted it just so that everything matched. But it is slightly different because these reinforcing ridges that they put in this one are not nearly as pronounced as on this one, but you get them on either side of the tractor, and if I'd have never told you, you'd have never noticed the difference, because other than that, they're the same cap. So, got that, and then got the spindle apart, or got the hub off, and got the hub tore apart, and where did I put it? Found this. This is neat. That roller's junk, that roller's junk, that roller's junk, that roller, that roller, that roller, and the cage is stretched. Which threw me for a loop because I could have swore, because I specifically remember we had this thing sitting down in the barn with the front end jacked up and the wheels off of it, working on the wheel bearings, because we did that when we put the new front tires on it. It had 3 ribs on it and they were shot. And I could have swore that we had this thing apart and we repacked them wheel bearings and put it back together. But apparently all we did was tighten them, because I know we had the hubcaps off. I know we did. I specifically remember it. So apparently we never did pack them, which became very apparent when I started taking that hub off and I was pulling out hunks of bearing in the grease. And the grease felt like it had been in there since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Which, if I'd have known that, I'd have just went ahead and ordered the bearings with the rest of my parts order and we'd be golden. But I could have swore we had them things apart and repacked them, but we clearly did not. So it wasn't even me trying to be a cheap ass. I just didn't think we needed the parts. So I called our bearing warehouse yesterday afternoon, and they had the inner bearings and the inner cones. They did not have the outer bearings, or the inner bearings and the inner cups. They did not have the outer bearings and the outer cups. And he could not tell me, with the holidays and everything going on, when they could have them. So, next best thing, I went to Napa, and they had everything except for one outer bearing, and that'll be here Tuesday. And they're still good bearings. They're FAGs. The bearings came out of Spain, and the races came out of the United States. And then I got one SKF. How that got in there, I don't know, but if this was a high speed, high weight, highway application, you wouldn't want to be, by all rights, because this bearing, even though it's an SKF, carries the exact same part number as this bearing, which is a Timken. They're both 25-878. That is a industry standard. If you order a 25-878, it does not matter what brand of bearing it is. It's going to be the same bearing because that is an SAE part number. So if you order that bearing, it should fit with any other brand cone or cup. Cups and I always do that. The bearing is the cone, the race is the cup. So if you order this bearing, or let's say you order a different cup, if they're two different brands, they should work together. Should. That being said, it is not recommended to mix and match, but like I say, it's a tractor. That wheel spins 25 miles an hour. You're not gonna hurt it. And I'm kind of curious to see if the one bearing that I'm waiting on when it gets here, if it's an SKF or an FAG. But, and there's nothing wrong with SKF bearings, or really any bearing that you get in a name brand box like FAGs. They're made by what the hell's the name of the company? There's an S. Schaeffler, which is an American company. Unfortunately, like every other bearing company, they have offshore manufacturing, but I'd rather have a bearing from Spain than China. So yeah, really, if you get any bearing like Japan, SKF has a plant in Argentina, I think. They got it. The SKF has a plant in South America, of all places. Really, if you get anything not made in China, Taiwan makes some. Taiwan can go either way. They have some good bearings and some bad bearings. But anything made in Japan, South America, Europe, or the USA, your chances are you're getting a good bearing. If it's a China bearing, it's shit. There's just China makes shit bearings. You can just pretty much bet your money on it. So, and it does piss me off that you can't buy something as simple. Well, you can't really say simple and roller bearing, because a roller bearing is actually a very complex piece of equipment, but the principle behind them is really damn simple. You can't buy something as simple as a damn roller bearing made in the United States. Why? I know why. It's because the government drove everybody out with their fucking leftist fucking policies. But, and the fact that I just said that's going to piss some people off, but fuck yeah. Anyhow, off the soapbox, onto something besides bearings. While I'm waiting on this paint to dry, I gotta make some new lock washers. Well, they're not lock washers, they're flat washers, but you bend them to lock the nut and the steering arm together so the nut can't back off. So I gotta make a couple of new ones of these, which is simple. You just take a piece of flat sheet metal and take a big or small hole saw and punch the center hole in it, and then you take a big hole saw and knock the blank out, and you got a washer. And we got sheet metal down there in the barn that'll do it. Got to do that for both sides. I can knock the outer races into the hubs. And I should be able, as long as the paint tacks up, which I got fast dry acrylic, which is pretty tough shit. We painted some more tractor parts when we did all the other stuff we did to it. We painted some of the smaller stuff in that acrylic. Actually, I think that's what the motor's painted in. I think. Can't remember. I know the fenders are not fast dry, because you don't want to use it on sheet metal because it dries so quick. Orange peel isn't the right term, isn't a very good. It looks kind of grainy. Like, it feels smooth, but it looks grainy when it dries. You put it on cast, you can't tell. It looks like regular paint on cast, but you might be able Yeah, you can kind of see it. I don't want to touch it. You can kind of see it. I don't know how well it's showing up on the camera. You can kind of see it on these hubcaps since they're smooth. It looks a little bit grainy. So like big pieces of sheet metal, the hood, anything like that, you don't want to use it. But for like cast iron parts and stuff where the finish on the part is garbage to begin with, you never notice it. But I'm going to let all this stuff get tacked up good and hard so that I can actually handle it and not have to worry about it. And get them washers made, and should be able to completely assemble one side today and get everything except the hub put on the other side, because I'm waiting on that one damn bearing, and go from there. Well, it worked out pretty good. We had two identical plates of galvanized 14 gauge already laying on the scrap shelf, which, near as I can measure, once you get the paint off, that's what the original washers were stamped out of, was 14 gauge. So all you got to do is you punch your center. Obviously this only works if you got a mill, that way you don't need to worry about the pilot hole, but punch your center hole in first and then knock the blank out with your big hole saw, which in this case I'm using a 1 3/8 and then a 3" to make the washer. So I am not going to video this part because I've tried videoing hole saws before, and when they start barking, the way the camera picks up the sound, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. So I'm just going to go ahead and knock these damn things out off camera, and we'll go from there. Alright, I think my paint's sufficiently dried enough for me to be confident enough to start putting stuff together. So, first thing is the Thrush Washer. This guy got to go on the spindle. And then the spindle goes in the axle, which I already put some grease on there just so that it's pre-lubricated. And then the felt goes in the underside of the steering arm. I don't know if I want to grease them splines or not. Normally they don't want you to lubricate a taper, because then you could pull it up tight enough that it's a bitch to get back apart. It's kind of pitted. I probably ought to put a little something on there, just because, I don't know. It doesn't seem right putting this together without some form of something. Grease is better than anti-seize. Anti-seize is bad. You really do not want to put anti-seize on a tapered fit anything, because you will not get that shit back apart because it slides so easy. Had guys do that at work before on gearboxes. They put taper lock bushings together with anti-seize, and then we got to go back and get them apart, and good luck. Is that right? I think one more spline is too far. That's way too far. Yeah, that's got to be right. And then we put the washer on and the nut. And just run it down kind of tight, and then you can tighten it the rest of the way when it's on the tractor and the steering and everything's hooked up, and you don't got to try to keep the thing held. Alright, now should be able to wrestle this thing back in here. That should be where we had it. Yep, that's where we had it. And then you drive the pin back in. And the U-bolt's going to be a challenge because it's sprung open. And just a friendly word of advice on these damn U-bolts: if you're redoing an axle that's got the original ones in it, just cut the damn things off and buy a new U-bolt. You'll, unless the threads are in good shape and you can get it apart without much fuss, you'll save yourself a bunch of headache. We are gonna have to close this damn thing up. Alright, I got the bolt back in, or U-bolt, sorry. I looked all over in the book and could not find a torque spec for it, so I'm just going with a standard grade 5 3/4 fine thread, which they're calling for 233 foot-pounds, which seems a tad excessive for a U-bolt. So I'm going to run it up 200. I already ran it up to 120. Let's go 170. And we'll see how that feels. And when you're torquing a U-bolt, you don't want to run one side up till it clicks and then run the other side up till it clicks. You want to draw it up even, so you give one a couple turns and you give the other one a couple turns. And if you draw them up even, they'll both click at the same time. If you only draw one side up, you're pulling one side up tight and they'll click at the same time, but it doesn't have even tension on both legs. My scrawny ass ain't built for this. That's 170. That seems pretty damn tight. Don't know if I should go up to 200 or not. That's pretty tight. Worst part is I don't know what grade that U-bolt is, because they don't grade U-bolts like they do regular bolts. Grade 5 is just kind of a standard medium grade fastener. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna break it. We'll go up to 200 and see what it feels like. Yeah. I think I'm going to stop there. That's pretty damn tight. And they don't give you a torque for this bolt either, so I'm probably just going to run that thing, get the tie rod and everything in there so it's held tight, and probably just going to run that one up with an impact, because that's an inch and 5/16 I think is what them threads are, so I don't think that impact will go high enough to torque that bolt to what it's actually supposed to, or torque that nut to what it's actually supposed to be. For something that big, you're probably talking an ungodly amount of torque to torque it to spec. But anyhow, put the tie rod in, tighten that up, fold the washer up so that it's locked down, then we can start on the hub. Now, before the hub can go on, you gotta put this on. This is the what's called the seal cup. This is actually, the seal runs against this surface. It's not a radial seal, it's an axial seal. So this just presses onto this flange right here. And sometimes it can be a little fun to get it to go. Basically, you just drive that on until it won't go no more. I'm sure there's actually a special tool for doing this, but it doesn't go on that hard. So generally, once you get it started, you just work your way around and it'll go on there like it's supposed to. Alright, so obviously I've had all the hubs cleaned up since yesterday, so we're good to just start driving parts back in. So, got the outer bearing race and then a bearing driver that matches it. And notice, bearing drivers are made out of aluminum. That way, if you bark anything up, you bark up the aluminum bearing driver, not the precision machined bearing race. That one's kind of fun to get down in there. One more love tap to make sure. There's that. And then the seal goes in the back, and these things are fun to put in because of the way they're built. That's what the axle seal on these looks like. The seal is on the outer face instead of in the middle like a lip seal would be. But the nice part about this design is the way these are made, you can take the rear bearing in and out of the hub without removing the seal, which makes it nice because you can take the hub on and off as many times as you want to repack or to service the bearings. And as long as the seal's good, you don't got to ruin the seal to do it, which is handy. Now, the nice thing about this style of seal is they are a tough son of a bitch. There's no spring or nothing. They're 100% rubber. And they're bonded really well. So basically to drive those in, and I'm sure that there's a special tool to do it, we ain't got it. But what you can do is take the biggest seal driver you got, or if you have a round plate or something you can set over it that'll fit down inside the hub, whatever you got, and just work your way around it, tapping it, and it fits. It's a snug fit, but it's not so tight that you can't beat against the rubber and get it to seat. And when it's all the way in there, it looks like that. But there's a shoulder turned in there. You just drive it up against that shoulder, and that's where it goes. And then before you put it on the tractor, you take your finger and run some grease on there so that it's not stuck on the cup, and it'll slide. But anyway, that's all ready to go, so now we can pack the bearings. Got the handy dandy bearing packer here. This saves you a lot of time. And I bet I get 2 pumps in it and the gun's out of grease, because that's the way it always goes. And I can't even bitch about it because I'm the one that uses the grease gun the most. The first one always takes the longest till you get the packer primed up, and then it goes faster. Come on. There we are. Take the grease out of the outside of it. Pack it all on, or take the grease out of the inside of it, and pack it all on the outside of the rollers. Then you got grease inside and outside the bearing. Set that one in the hub since it's a mess. And then take the next one. And I forgot to grab paper towel. But you get the idea. Alright, and then once you get your bearings packed, this should all be pretty redundant shit. Wheel bearings are easy. And it's also the job that I hate the most, just because it's so messy and unpleasant. I hate wheel bearings. Let go. There we go. On the spindle. And the part that amazed me was what they don't have a washer behind that nut, but the way they machine the nut goes right on the inner race of that outer bearing, so I guess they don't need a washer, but I need to find the right socket for it, because I took them out with a wrench and that didn't work so well. For future reference, both the spindle nut and the axle nut are 1 5/8" on these things, in case that ever helps anybody out. here it is. You gotta be aware of where your cross holes are. It's getting kind of tight. That's too tight. I think that's our winner right there. I got a hole here and I got a hole here, and that one lines up and the next one's too tight, so I think we're going with that one because that feels pretty darn good. And wheel bearings on these things are kind of tricky. They're not tricky. They're not any harder than any normal wheel bearing, but you got to feel them a little more because what would normally, that seal on the back, just the way they feel up against that cup, you can mistake that for bearing drag that you would normally feel just spinning the hub and tightening it up bearings. But and you pull in and out on it, it's nice and snug. So I think we're gonna go with it because I like that. And then you just stick your cotter pin in it, and I'm gonna put the hubcap back on it. But when I do that, I'm only gonna Permatex the side of the gasket that's on the cap itself with the ridges, because of those ridges that are those strengthening ridges that are stamped into it. And I'm gonna leave the side that mates up against the hub dry. That way, A, I can run this thing over a few acres, pull it back apart, check the wheel bearings, and not screw the gasket up. And B, every once in a while, X amount of acres or X amount of years, however you feel like doing it, you can pull the hub back apart, pull the bearings out, clean them, repack them, put it back together, and not have to buy a new damn gasket every time, because that's a nice machine flat surface. All it's got to do is keep out dirt and water and keep the grease in, and just a cardboard on metal seal is good enough. It doesn't really need any. It's not like you're trying to keep oil in there, because oil will find its way through the smallest crack possible. The only thing worse than trying to keep oil in is trying to keep air in something. But yeah, go ahead and put the cotter pin in that, put the hubcap back on. I can slap the other side back together, at least up until the hub. I can get the tie rod put, I can get the steering arm put on. I can assemble everything except the hub because I ain't got that last bearing. And we will catch you guys when I get all that done. Well, now she doesn't look as sad. She just looks like she's standing on a crutch. This side's done. This side is almost just waiting on a hub. This thing, I got all the guts put back in the hub, and this one was fun. You can definitely tell that it ate a set of bearings at one point. Both races went in kind of hard, and then I had to fight to get that seal in. It kept wanting to start crooked, and it kept hanging up in one spot, and I ended up having to take a paddle wheel, that guy, and clean the landing up that goes into. And I finally got it to go down in there and seat, but it took me about half hour at least to get that in there, because I didn't want to screw it up, so I was being kind of ginger with it. But if I had one more bearing, we could be done. But the upside is, while I'm waiting for that, now that I got one tire on the ground and it's sitting solid on a jack stand, I don't feel bad about pulling that tank out now. The way I don't think it was going anywhere the way I had it sitting on that weight bracket, but that was just kind of a precarious position to have it in. And I didn't want to go jerking around too much, pulling that tank and push it off the stand or something. I feel a lot safer having it standing on 3 feet with one jack stand. So we'll should be able to have all that, as long as the tank comes out all right. That shouldn't take much more than a day. Probably work on that Saturday, since tomorrow's Christmas. And actually, we might have a white Christmas because it's been snowing for about the last 2 hours. So, got that to look forward to for once. I think the last 2 or 3 it's been brown, which ain't no fun. But anyhow, I guess, since we can't really go any further today, I still got to go home and wrap presents and stuff. And I might make one more quick video tonight to put up Christmas Day. And you'll be seeing this probably Saturday. We'll see how things go. I don't know why I say this at the end of every video, because if it's up, you're already seeing it. It doesn't matter what time I say you're going to see it, but, yeah. Not a bad day. Probably should have got more done, but I was working kind of slow, taking my time, because I knew I didn't have parts. So, anyhow, I guess. Get tools cleaned up. I'm done with that bench, so that can go back down to the barn, get rid of that jack stand, kind of get some shit organized around here. Yeah. So I guess that's it for this one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.